And this is March 1st, 2016. Tonight I have a real special guest, and his name is Stefan Verstappen. I hope I said that correctly, and you can correct me in a few minutes. We're going to talk about the art of urban survival, and he wrote a book on this. And I mean, I'm telling you, if there was any disaster, I wouldn't want to be with him. I would want to be with him, okay? So let me ask everybody, are you guys really prepared for a disaster? What if right now all the lights went out? No internet. Yeah, you'd all be going through withdrawals. No cell phone. Oh my God, even more withdrawals. No cash machine. No way to buy food. The gas pumps won't work. The traffic lights stop working and the city comes to a standstill. Could you survive for 3 days or 3 weeks? So Stefan, in his book, has gathered some incredible essential information on what people everywhere can do to prepare for and survive any disaster. Now, there's been a survey that says that more than 83% of Americans are unprepared to survive a disaster for even 3 days. And yet, even a minor disaster could easily force people to deal with an emergency on their own, possibly for days or even weeks before help arrives. So, Stefan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Cathy.
Oh, I love it. You are so brilliant, I have to say.
Oh, okay.
God, I caught you off balance. I mean, you know, you're my kind of guy. You're a writer, you're an adventurer, you're a survival expert. And, you know, you've conducted workshops everywhere, and you've written 6 books, including The Art of Urban Survival, which we're going to talk about tonight. You know, I'm very, very honored to have you come on the show, so thank you.
Oh, you're quite welcome. I'm honored to be on your show.
What inspired you to write the book?
Well, I was teaching martial arts for many years, and it started off, you know, most people would like to learn like self-defense, and so I taught Krav Maga and survival and self-defense courses, and it's good. I recommend everybody have some self-defense training. I mean, you know, it's a couple of months of one night a week or so, and then go, you know, once a year and renew the course and get some training in, because it can always come in handy. It's like an insurance policy. You hope you never collect on it. You know, you don't buy car insurance hoping that you're going to get into a car accident. And the same thing, you know, with a little bit of survival training or a little bit of self-defense training, you're not buying into this hoping that you're going to have to use it. You're hoping that you don't have to use it. But if something were to happen, then, you know, you'd be way better off having a little bit of training. So the problem is, though, what I wanted to get across to people is that when you take self-defense training, people typically envision a mugger or the stranger rapist. You know, you're walking down the street and somebody jumps out from a dark corner and tries to rape you. The problem is that is really the least dangerous thing that can happen to you in a city. There's a lot of things that are more likely to happen than you being mugged or you being raped. And so I wanted to include that into the self-defense. And the other thing, too, is when you take a self-defense course, the implication is that the solution to every problem is violence. Now, when I taught it, I always, you know, mentioned that violence is the absolute last solution. If you find yourself in a dark alley having to fight 6 armed attackers, then well, you've made 3 big mistakes already. And those mistakes are, you know, strategic. They're mistakes of intelligence, not mistakes because you're, you know, not a good fighter. So, but in the context of a self-defense course, I would devote the last 10 minutes of the class to try and bring some of these ideas to the forefront. But you can't really do that. So instead, what I did was I started writing, notes, take-home sheets for my students, how to avoid situations where you would have to use violence. And this eventually evolved. For many years I was an instructor for St. John Ambulance, and I'd done the Outward Bound program. I was a wilderness survival instructor for a youth home here in Toronto. So I wanted to bring that into it too, because, it's not just that you live in the city and the only thing you have to worry about is crime. No, there are many things that you should know about. And it's all part of, the way of the warrior, the way of self-defense. You should know how to handle yourself in an emergency, because, you can't always rely on somebody to save you. And especially if it's a disaster that would affect a whole city. So all those take-home notes kind of evolved, and so I wrote The Art of Urban Survival, which, I tried to emulate my favorite books when I was a kid, which was like the Boy Scouts manual. It had everything in it, how to pitch a tent, how to, build the fire, how to build a canoe. So I wanted something like that for people that lived in the city. So it's got everything in it, how to prevent crime, self-defense techniques if you do have crimes, how to secure your home, what to do if you're in a car accident, what to do if you have to take public transportation or if you get lost in a bad part of the city, how to improvise weapons, what to do if the city's on fire and you have to evacuate.
Well,
so
what
it's
you
all
also
in there.
did, if I could, is that,
Yeah.
it is like a manual, and because I have also the book in my hand, and you've got it divided into 3 sections. One is surviving predators. The second is surviving natural disasters. And then the third is surviving social disasters. Now, I love it because you address things that, a lot of people don't even want to look at. So when you say surviving predators, what are you talking about?
Well, I based that division into 3 based on nature. I love nature and I love to study it. And there are, when you're an animal species on this planet, there are 2 things that will kill you. One is predators. Most of life on this planet is eat or be eaten. It's kind of cruel and nasty part of nature, but it's the way things go. The second part is natural disasters. Animals can be eaten by another animal, or there could be a forest fire, or there could be an avalanche, or a flood. And but the third hazard that is unique to humans is social disasters. We are subject to predators. So in the law of the jungle, if you're a sheep, then you have to worry about wolves. If you're a human, in the law of the jungle in the city, you have to worry about criminals. So the first chapter, is defense against predators, meaning defense against various types of criminals, everything from, muggers and stalkers to street gangs and carjackers and things like that. The second is...
If I could, what I like, and I just want to bring up is that you describe what a predator can be like, and you describe what a sociopath is like. And, what are some of the key characteristics of a sociopath? So you can recognize these people and run like the wind, so to speak, right?
Yeah, actually, that first chapter of the book is called Defense Against the Psychopath, and I created a video based on that chapter, and it's gotten over 500,000 hits. It's really popular, and there are natural predators in nature, and we think that we are on top of the food chain, so there's nothing that eat us anymore. We're not worried about a cougar eating us unless you live in, up in the hills in California, which occasionally still happens. But generally, we're not worried about being eaten by another animal. But nature abhors a vacuum. Anytime there's a niche, a food source in nature will evolve a predator to take advantage of it. So human beings actually have a natural predator, and those predators are what we call psychopaths. they are devoid of conscience. They no lot more care about, the rest of humanity than, a crocodile cares about the zebra it's eating. So, in order to, I'm also, my first book, to regress here for a second, is based on Chinese military strategy, and the famous strategist Sun Tzu wrote, "Know your enemy and know yourself." So the first principle is know your enemy. So that's why that is the first chapter in the book. If you're going to survive in this society, you have to know what the primary predator of this society is and know what their characteristics are, and then learn how to avoid being a victim of them. And the primary predator of our society are psychopaths. So, did you want to respond to that? Hello?
Cathy, are you muted?
Yeah, I was.
Oh.
Okay. and then a pop-up appeared, and it's like, God, what is this? Okay. Well, that's absolutely
I can go on
true.
and on, but I thought I'd give you a break to
thank you. Yeah, catch me off guard, huh? But it is true, because I've also read, I don't know if you know Scott Ritter, who's in the military, and he wrote The Art of War as Applied to the Peace Movement. And he has all these strategies in there, and that is one of them. You really need to know what you're up against. And, then you can actually make better judgments.
Yeah, absolutely. So, they cause the most problems in our society. They're behind almost all the bad things that go on. And so, we got to know about them, Let's study their behavior. And then when you study them, you can predict them. And this is the key to survival in any situation, is trying to be able to think ahead what's going to happen and how to avoid it and prepare for it. And so once you study psychopaths, you're better able to predict what they're going to do, and therefore you're better able to protect yourself.
Well, you even share with people in your book, which I also love. I really love your book, how to really look at people and their body movements, and, how to tell when they're deceiving. And could you give us some of the examples of that?
Well, it's an imperfect science, but there is a lot to be had from being able to read people's body language. Now, from my years of training in martial arts, I'll be honest with you, I can tell a lot just by the way the person walks. I can spot a person 50 yards away and pretty much deduce whether or not there are any threats to me just by the way they move, by the way they walk. Because, your personality and your physiology is interconnected. And so your personality traits will manifest itself in your body language. And if you're able to read that body language, then again, you're able to see things and be able to predict things. Again, the key is to be, to see what's coming. So there are some body language traits. It's under the chapter, How to Tell When Somebody's Lying. And, it comes with a big caveat. There's a lot of people that claim that, they can tell definitely by body language and certain tells, which is like what poker players try to do when they're bluffing. They might have a twitchy eye or something like that, and other poker players will read them and be able to predict what their hand is going to be. But generally, there's different ways that people lie, and they will reveal their lies through body language, but also they'll reveal their lies through logical fallacies, things that just don't make sense, that give you a feeling like, geez, that doesn't add up. So when you combine the two, reading the person's body, and then what, I guess you call higher criticism, which is, it's not being critical of people, but it's rather examining the internal logic of a story to see if it adds up, And so the internal logic of a person's story might not add up. Like, for example, the person tells you they're a doctor, but they don't know what the word stethoscope means, So, well, that's a pretty big clue that they're lying about being a doctor. So you have to combine the two together. I list a bunch of tells in the book, the classical ones where, uh, one of the myths is that you look a person in the eye and they won't look you in the eye when they're lying. Well, that's such a myth that every liar is sure to look you in the eye when they're lying now. So you can't go by that one. But they may, the blink rate may increase when they're lying. So they'll be telling a story and their eyes will blink once every 2 seconds or so, which is natural. But then when they get to the part of the story when they have to make things up, their eyes start blinking at a faster rate. For example, that is one clue that would tell you they're lying. Gestures that would indicate that they're hiding something would be like putting their hand close to their mouth or averting their eyes downwards just briefly or kind of closing up, crossing their legs, arms over the chest. All of those are just little tells. But again, you have to study people. So if you study, the chapter on psychopaths, and then you study the chapter on how to detect lies, and you add it all up together, and then you use kind of your intuition. A lot of this depends on a person's. You got to have a good sense of things, and so. Hopefully this book, when you read through it, you'll get a lot of this information and it will help to develop your instinct because you're better off if you can internalize all this information and then you just have an instinct about people. I think you know what I'm talking about, Cathy, right?
Oh, I do. And, when we're getting, onto the chapter about, I'm skipping ahead, anger and aggression, and you're talking about personal space. One year I was out in Montana and I saw a moose and I decided to get close to it. And, I could tell the minute I got into his personal space because he got very irritated. And so I just kind of, gently backed away and then he was okay. So there is that, and we all do have it. It's like people say, get out of my bubble.
Yeah, and so the chapter on space and anger and aggression, again, it's a preventative chapter. What I wanted to do is these are the signs that the people you are dealing with are trying to control their anger and that they're about to pop, that their anger and aggressiveness is about to boil over and it might result in actual physical violence. And again, it's important to be able to read those body language and then the strategy. And, to be honest with you, this chapter is something I've discussed a lot with a friend of mine who is the head instructor for the police academy here, and he specifically trains in close combat training with the police officers. And he wrote a essay, which unfortunately, and I'm not going to mention his name, but the essay was rejected by the police college because what he tried to do was teach officers to understand that when they're dealing with a mentally ill person on the verge of becoming violent, you have to be aware of their space. So what happens with police when they see somebody that's mentally ill and it looks like they're going to lose it, they move into their space aggressively and then boom, this triggers these guys into becoming violent. Immediately, it's the fight and flight response. And if they had kept their space, and it's the same way I tell people. It's like you deal when you the same tactic that you do use when you're walking in the woods and suddenly you come across a bear. You don't invade their space. You step back slowly. You keep facing them. You speak calmly. You try to diffuse the situation. So the chapter on anger and aggression is to use that strategy. I mean, we want to fight people? I've been in situations. I'm a big guy, and I've been in pretty hairy parts of town all over the world, I could have gotten into a lot of trouble, but whenever I saw that kind of trouble, I mean, what am I going to do? I'm going to start throwing punches at people because they got a bad attitude? No, I can diffuse the situation. I can talk myself out of anything. And isn't that better than resorting to violence? Of course it is, because violence is always going to be an uncertain outcome. Even if you win, what if you kill the guy? then you are going to be charged with murder. So in every situation, if you can read the person, you can read the situation, see when their symptoms are coming about that they're going to lose it and become violent, then diffuse it. Back away, speak calmly. I've avoided a lot of fights by saying simply, look, I'll buy you a beer. We'll forget about it. For $3 for a beer, I have avoided violence and bloodshed and misery and visits to the hospital and lawsuits. I can avoid all that by buying somebody a beer. However, it's always good to have some training, because if buying them a beer and doesn't work, then you still might have to take them down.
Well, let's give that into the preventing anger. What do you mean when you say people should become like water?
Well, it's a Chinese expression. I'm not sure if Sun Tzu used it so much. I'm pretty sure that Lao Tzu or Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching, the seminal work on Taoism, he was the one that always advocated becoming like water. And becoming like water means you avoid what is hard and you penetrate what is weak. So if I'm up against a big guy, he's drunk, he's getting violent, and now he's directing his anger towards me, I'm not going to stand right in front of that anger and take it. I'm going to evade. I'm going to move off, but not necessarily backwards. I'm going to move off at a slight angle, in a circular motion. So he has to continually reposition himself to direct his anger towards me. And I'll keep redirecting that, because that's what water does. I'll give you an example of how this works. If you've ever tried to hold a beach ball underwater with one hand, it's impossible. It will always find a way of, slipping out of your hand and popping back up to the surface. This is the principle of self-defense, where you become like water, where somebody directs their anger at you, and let's say it does become violent, you continue using that strategy, because when they attack you, you evade the direct attack, but you kind of circle around in a circular motion until you're beside them or behind them. So, you're in a position of advantage then. So even if it does become a direct attack, you still use the same principle, and that is avoid what is hard. Now, attack what is weak. Diffuse the system, diffuse the situation. So let's say they're angry at you because, well, I don't know, you parked your car in your parking spot. So, go around that and say, okay, well, we're going to move the car and, give me a few minutes, and, you evade the confrontation. You're not going to say, well, I got there first or whatever, or I didn't know. But, you have to kind of be in this situation.
It's like being the bigger person out of the situation. And it's you just do the right thing.
Well, exactly. It is being the bigger person. And I'll be honest with you. I'm a big guy, and I've trained in martial arts for a long time, and I don't need to prove anything. What does it matter to me if I say, I'm sorry, or sure, you're right. Let's forget about it. Let's go for a beer, or why don't you go home to the wife and kids and sleep it off or whatever. How does that affect me? It doesn't matter to me. What I'm doing is avoiding harming people, and I have nothing to prove because I know myself. So to play the bigger man or kind of thing, there's a French expression called noblesse oblige, which means if you are in a superior position, you are obliged to show kindness to people under you. So I'm a big guy. I remember one time I was in a bar in Taipei, and I met some girl at the bar, and some other guy came up, and he started arguing over the girl. And he said, let's step outside. And the problem was the guy was like 5'5", out of shape. I could have wiped that street with him with one arm tied behind my back. What am I going to do? Am I going to hurt this guy? No, I said, listen, you know what? Let's let her decide who she'd like to have a beer with. But meanwhile, I'm going to buy you a beer and we'll just call it a night, okay? And so that's what happened. Because what? You know, I'm in a superior position. He didn't know about my training or anything like that. And I could tell, like I said, when you train a lot, you can tell people by their body language. I knew this guy couldn't be able to defend himself at all. I guess he was a little bit drunk and he was full of himself and he thought if he picked a fight or something, it would make him look better. Whatever. You know, do I care? I just didn't want to hurt this guy for no good reason. And so I avoided it.
All right, I'm back too. Okay. You also give some techniques on how to help people calm down from their fear.
Oh, overcoming fear? Yeah. Well, you know, fear and anger, you know, it's the thing is to displace the energy that fear and anger build up. So basically, you need to read them too, because there are some physiological signs. You know, there's a time when they start to turn white. When they're red, people, when they get angry, they first get flushed. And this is the fight and flight response kicking in. It kicks in what they call the sympathetic nervous system. The breathing gets heavy. Person starts to sweat. There's more oxygen being distributed into the bloodstream. The adrenals start to produce adrenaline to increase the efficiency of using sucrose in the muscle tissue so that they can they'll become stronger. At this stage in their anger, it's, they're not ready to attack you yet. And what happens then is this heightened state of arousal can only last so long, and then the parasympathetic system kicks in. And I explain all that in the book too. And what the parasympathetic system does is reverse all the build up to violence that the sympathetic system has triggered. But there is this kind of balancing point, and it's at that balance point that they might suddenly attack and become violent. So that's the point where you have to step back 10 feet.
All right, I'm back. Sorry. Did you even know I was gone?
No.
I've had my internet dropped. And thank God you just talked right through it and didn't even know I was gone. I just got back online again. I mean, it's crazy. I've never had been knocked off so much in one show. I mean, my goodness, people don't want us to talk about the art of urban survival.
Yeah, well, it's happened before.
Well, whoever the censors are, remember, guys, karma is a bitch. Trust me. Karma return. Ooh, doggy. Okay, so moving along, because I really don't know what you were talking about, because I was knocked offline.
Well, I'd gone over some of the signs and symptoms when a person loses it.
Okay.
Uh-oh. I think you're gone again.
Are you gone again, Cathy? All right. Continue on, Stefan. She's really having some issues tonight with her Skype.
Yeah. Okay.
I've been listening and enjoying the conversation.
Do we have any questions in the chat room?
Well, you were talking about how to recognize signs of anger in a person, and I think about the time you got to when somebody first gets angry and they're flushed and red, and then they turn white. Is that when they're getting ready to just explode?
All right, I'm back.
She's back.
Skype is giving you up and down tonight, isn't it?
It seems to be. God, must be a new censor. Well, it's going to be sucked to be him, I think. So, where were we, Stefan? I might as well call it your show tonight, huh?
I guess.
You are a very good conversationalist, Stefan, and you don't wait to be asked pointed questions. You just keep going, and that's excellent since we're having some issues tonight.
Yeah, I guess it works well for me, huh?
Well, I'll mute and let you go back to it.
Okay, so let's talk about street smarts.
Yeah, so, well, all of these things contribute to street smarts. So there's a chapter on street smarts. And again, all these chapters are very short and to the point. I don't go into a lot of verbiage. Again, I wanted it to be like a Boy Scout manual. This is what you need to know. This is how it works. And now we've moved on to the next lesson. So street smarts, I grew up in the worst neighborhood of Toronto. And I later on became what's known as a detached street worker in the same neighborhood. I had a partner who was shorter than me with curly black hair, and they used to call us Starsky and Hutch, if you remember the old series.
Yes.
Because I was tall and blonde, and he was short and curly haired. And anyways, there is street smarts is just a kind of a cynical attitude, basically. Like whatever happens on the street is because somebody wants something. And I know it's bad to it's not a pleasant way to go through life, thinking that everybody that's talking to you or everybody that comes up to you is after something. But that's what street smarts are. You have to have a very cynical and nihilistic kind of attitude if you're going to survive in a bad neighborhood. And that's all there's to it. So if you combine all of the knowledge in that first few chapters, how psychopaths work, how when to tell when people are angry or being deceptive, how to tell when they're lying to you. Now you add to it kind of an overall cynical attitude, and you've got a pretty good street sense. Because what happens with my students that I was training is that, okay, they can learn how to escape from a grab or somebody gets them in a chokehold, how to get out of it. That's fine. But street smarts is to not get into that situation to begin with. And so you have to be able to, do things like read what the street is doing. Based on like graffiti and the type of neighborhood you're in and what other people are doing. For example, most people, when they get lost in a bad neighborhood, they go somewhere where there's lights and they stand underneath the lights, because they feel they're safer there because there's a light. Actually, that's the worst thing you can do. You're just, putting out a sign, look at me, I'm ready to be a victim. You stick to the shadows, and you stick to the side of the streets. You don't walk down the middle of the street. So all those, strategies are part of being street smart.
Let's see how much time we have. What should a person have in their car emergency kit? What are some of the things?
I recommend people have a bunch of emergency kits. For example, I have three emergency kits. And then in addition to my emergency kit, I've got a very good first aid kit and a communications kit. So let me talk about the simplest emergency kit, and that is a pocket kit. Excuse me. I do a lot of bicycling, and I love to explore cities that I'm living in or visiting by bicycle, because it's fast enough to cover a lot of distance, but it's slow enough that you can see everything that's going on in the city. And so I've bicycled through just about every city that I've visited and got to know it really well. But I will carry a small kit. It's about the size of a what do you call those? A candy tin, 3 inches by 5 inches by 1.5 inches thick. And I have some equipment in there, like a tools, a small flashlight. I have, just in case you get a headache, I've got, a couple of aspirin and some ibuprofen. I have a small first aid kit in there. And I have a small Leatherman tool, which is like a pliers that goes with that. And I keep that all in a small kit. I have a bicycle chain repair kit, and also a flat tire kit. And those things have saved my life many times. I've been in a bad neighborhood, like I was bicycling through a bad part of Oakland, California one time. And, I got a flat tire, and right at the same time I got the flat tire, there was the lights started going out, and it started getting dark. And little did I know that all the gas stations and everything would close down at 6 o'clock. And so there I was, sort of in a deserted part of the town with the lights going out and everything closing down. And I was miles away from home, but I had my kit, and I was able to patch the tire and get back on the road. It took me about 10 minutes, but if I had to walk through that neighborhood, I would have been in danger, So I have my personal kit, and I take that with me whenever I go bicycling. Then I have a kit that I keep in the car, and it's a little bit more, there's a bit more in that kit. It's bigger because I don't have to carry it in my pocket or in my backpack. I can carry it in the back of the car. And in that kit, I have things that I need in case the car breaks down. Like I have a tool kit. So I've got sockets and wrenches. So, if something goes on, I'm pretty handy with my around machinery. I could probably fix it, or at least try to fix it, Then I've got like road flares and emergency blanket. I've got extra water, extra oil for the engine, extra windshield wiper fluid. I've got extra antifreeze. I've got because I live in Canada, I'll keep a bag of rock salt in the back in case I get stuck and I need to get out of a ditch or something like that. Ropes and a winch. A winch is great to carry in the car because if you ever get pulled over or you ever get stuck in the side of the ditch or you have an accident, you go off the road and you're stuck there, a winch can get you out in 15 minutes, So those are the types of things. I also have, of course, flashlights. I think I mentioned emergency blankets, but also a good pair of shoes, an extra hat, extra gloves, and an extra jacket. And again, because, I live in Canada and the temperatures can get pretty cold here. So in case you get stranded in your car, I got some extra warm clothes. I got some good shoes. And especially for women, carry a pair of running shoes in your car at all times because women wear, the nice shoes when they're going to the office. But what if suddenly, you're on the side of the road and the weather turns bad and you have to walk, 5 miles to get to a gas station or to find some help, then
they did.
You need the running shoes.
I know, and I wish the writers of Jurassic Park would have heard you. Did you ever see the last movie? They had that woman, the star, running in high heels. I mean, this woman, she amazed me. She is right up there with Ginger Rogers. I mean, she never lost a heel.
Nope.
I mean, come on. She didn't need running shoes. I was amazed. But now all of this is common sense. I want to travel with you, Stefan. I mean, it's like you don't have to bring everything. He's got it all. He comes with accessories.
Yeah, but it's you think it's a lot, but it's not really. Like my pocket kit literally fits in my pocket, and I've got everything in there. I've got to in case I get a headache or a couple of times I banged up the bike and I cut myself, and at least I had Band-Aids there. I could stop the bleeding. With the car kit, it's really not that much. It all fits into like a kind of like a carry-on bag, not even a full backpack. I'm just talking about a little satchel bag. Everything fits in there, and it takes up hardly any room. In terms of money, well, my pocket kit, maybe $30 I spent if you include everything. For the car kit, maybe $60, $80. But these are things that can save your life. And I've used all my kits. I've always had, throughout my life, some time that I'm glad I had that kit because it really helped for the situation I was in. And then, of course, I have my home emergency kit, which now is probably the biggest kit, and that fits into a backpack. And I keep that in the closet, and it's got everything I need so that if I had to get out of my apartment or my house and I had to, evacuate, and I had, minutes to do it. Let's say, the radio announcer comes on. There's a, in your case there in Hawaii, there's a tsunami heading. You've got, 20 minutes to get 15 miles away from the coast. Well, you've got that kit, you grab it out of the closet, you throw it in your car, and boom, you're gone. Or if you can't use your car, then you got that kit, you throw it on your backpack, and you run like hell. But at least you'll have everything you need to survive for about 3 days. I've got 3 days worth of water, 3 days worth of food. I've got walkie-talkies. I've got emergency radios, flashlights, shelter, first aid kit. Did I mention the first aid kit? And also security. I've got a knife in there.
What kind of food do you have in it?
I've got just the condensed emergency rations. It's kind of like peanut butter chocolate. It's very dense, and it's high in calories. And, look, it's not something you'd want to eat, but if you've ever fasted for, 4 days, you know what it's like. Anything will taste good, and you need the calories, especially in an emergency situation, because you're going to be nervous. It's not just the fear, but it's the anxiety and it's the pressure and having to think fast and move fast and lift things and get out of the way. And you're burning through calories like crazy. And, you'll end up with low blood sugar in no time at all. And suddenly, you might mentally be prepared to do this, that, and the other, but your knees have given out on you. You can't stand, you can't walk, you can hardly do things. There's this really awful weakness that comes about when you are suddenly deprived of enough calories to run your body. So even though, it doesn't taste great, it doesn't matter, because what you need to do is provide calories to your body so you can continue doing and continue to survive. So that's
okay.
what I got.
Now, you were also talking about a little kit that you had for communication. So where would one get a handheld CB radio?
Oh, they're easy to find. You can buy them online, and the price for them has gone down quite a bit with this whole, offshoring and manufacturing electronic products in China. It used to be, 20 years ago, it would cost you, $300 for half decent CB, but now you can buy it for like $50, $60. And I don't recommend the CB as much. Like, it's okay. It's better than nothing. But they now have these very small, very lightweight ham radios that broadcast and receive on FM and shortwave and FM radio. And these are good because you could call for help. Their range isn't that great, but you might be picked up by local ham radio operators or maybe a relay station. But most important is that you can listen into ham radio broadcasts, and you can hear, for example, my ham radio, I have it tuned into the what's called the emergency trunk line. So I can hear the crosstalk, meaning the communications between ambulances and fire departments and police departments and their home bases, and I can hear what's going on, and that gives you a much better picture of what's really going on than if you were to rely on FM broadcasts. For example, about 3 years ago, we had a brief thunder shower here in Toronto, but it dropped like 6 inches in 45 minutes. It flooded the subways, it flooded a couple of the highways, it closed down public transport, it flooded one of the big transformer stations, the power went out in the city, and with the power, strangely enough, all the cell phones came down too. So now I turn on the FM radio because I have one of those emergency FM radio, AM FM radios, with the crank, and I'm listening to the local radio stations. Now, we are without power already for half an hour, and still not a word from any of the radio stations about what's going on or what's happening. And I said, well, screw this. I'm taking out the ham radio, and I tuned into the trunk line, and within 5 minutes, I knew exactly what was going on. I knew which highways were flooded. I knew why the public transport was shut down. I knew why the the power went out. I knew that the ambulances were all busy rescuing people trapped in elevators. I knew there was a search and rescue party going on for people that were nearby one of the creeks that suddenly flooded and washed them all the way down the creek. So getting a ham radio and keeping that as part of your emergency kit is really, really important because you can find out what's really going on. The next door neighbor said they were planning on evacuating. They wanted to go to see their friends, and they're going to go along this highway. And I said, well, actually, that highway has been closed off because I just heard the dispatcher requesting a couple of cruisers to rope off the exit and on-ramps to that highway because that was one of the highways that got flooded by this freakish flash flood. So now they know don't go that way because you would have been trapped in traffic for the next 6 hours because they just shut down the city. So, again, the same with what I talked about in the early part of the book about being able to anticipate and read the situation is really important because then you can make predictions what's going to happen. So a good communication system and knowing how to use it is essential to figuring out what the situation is, and then you can predict it and figure out strategies to survive it.
Well, you also talk about dealing with the police, which I really find very interesting, and teaching people how to deal with them.
Sure, because police are a threat too. You're dealing with men that are armed, and my rule, is when you're dealing with armed men, you have to be careful because, mistakes can suddenly become fatal. Two guys in a bar, they disagree about something. The worst can happen. One guy throws a punch. At least back in the old days. Nowadays, everybody's carrying something. You never know. But with police departments, well, they're armed and they might be nervous and they might have had a bad day. And you might do something, again, like what we talked about earlier. You might be invading their space. And then when you invade their space and they're already nervous, they might start shooting. So it's important to understand all the threats in a society. And police, I have members in the police forces. They're good guys. Most of them are really good people. Every once in a while, you're going to get a rotten one. And how can you tell? How can you tell when the flashing lights behind you pulls you over on a secluded stretch of road and you're a woman by yourself that this is one of the sheepdogs, one of the guys that's pretty good, or whether he's a predator? He could be a psychopath too, because a lot of psychopaths like to become police because of the power of being a police officer. And we've seen over history, over the course of time, hundreds, if not thousands of cases where police officers were, serial rapists, ran organized crime gangs, dealt drugs, smuggled arms, so you can't tell. So when you're being pulled over, you don't know what you're dealing with. Hopefully it's one of the good guys. Chances are it's going to be one of the good guys, but every now and then it's not going to be one of the good guys. And so you have to know how to behave around them so that you don't give this guy an excuse to shoot you. That's simple as that.
How do you feel? Now, you wrote this book a little, it's not that old, but it is old, but it was written before the Patriot went into effect. So how do you protect yourself and what advice do you give to people? Because of the Patriot, they can do anything they want now, the police.
My advice is always to never get pulled over. Just don't. You have to kind of play the gray man. I do the workshops, and I tell this story in the workshop because it works for me. I take advantage of people's expectations. For example, I have a coat that I wear. And interference. You hear that?
I do.
Where's that coming from? Oh, okay. and you're gone.
I'm here.
Oh, you're there? Oh, okay.
I think so. Oh, you can hear me.
Yeah. And so is the hit. That's static back. Yeah, so you try to avoid drawing attention to yourself. For example, when I drive, I always drive the speed limits. I have old ladies pass me and give me the finger on highways. So, but I don't care. It's just like we went back to the other, story about being in the bar and saying, do I care? I don't care. I'm avoiding getting a speeding ticket, but more importantly, I'm avoiding being pulled over by the police, which means there's a greater chance of me being shot or arrested. So I drive the speed limit. I'm right on it all the time. Also, I keep my car up to date, make sure there's no lights out or anything like that. I'm not, I don't give them an excuse to pull me over. So you kind of fit in, you blend in. Now, the other thing I do is because I'm a big guy and I sort of look like a cop or a fireman or something like that already. What I do is I wear a bright red jacket with my kung fu crest on my over my breast pocket. Now my kung fu school's crest sort of looks like a police badge or something like that. It's got a dragon on it, but it's also got a shield. But when you stand 10 feet away, it looks like a cop's badge. And I did that on purpose because it's part of the disguise. I'm not imitating a police officer, but if you stood 20 feet away from me and you had to guess what I was, you would think I was a police officer. I do that on purpose. I also have this bright red coat that I wear, which looks like the kind of coat that a fireman or an emergency responder would wear. And on my left shoulder pad, I also, sewed on a couple of my St. John ambulance patches. Now, when I sit in the driver's seat and you're a cop and you pull up to the left side of me and you take a look over, you see a guy in a red coat that looks like he's got some sort of official patches.
Hello?
Yeah. Sometimes that might be me. Anyways, no, it's not me.
Keep
anyway,
talking.
so is the cop going to pull me over? I look like one of them kind of thing, and so the chances are they're going to pass me by and look for somebody that looks more suspicious. Yeah, that's the chance, But then on the other hand, I go to, kind of a bad part of town.
Can you hear me?
Hello. We are trying to get Cathy back. There seems to be all kinds of Skype issues on her end tonight. In the meantime, we have been talking to Stefan. Remember, folks, Revolution Radio is a listener-supported station. Your donations are very important to us. If you want to make a donation, go to the home page, find the donate button. Any amount is appreciated. We also have seeds. You can buy seeds for the coming spring, or if you want to store them, they will keep up in the freezer for 20 years. They are non-GMO. We got the giant seed box today for ourselves, and there's not anything I can think of except maybe pole beans that I did not find in that box. There's T-shirts, coffee mugs, all kinds of things. We are talking with Stefan. Stefan, are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm still here.
I cannot get Cathy back. I told her to try to call in. I've tried to drag her in. That's not working. She did change her wireless today, so I don't know if that is the issue or not. But I told her to see if she
I think she's back on.
No, she's not. She's not on. Let me see. There we go. I'm trying to call her now. Maybe the kinks. Well, I've lost everybody.
I'm still here.
Oh, okay. All right. Man, this is nuts. I can't drag her in, and it won't even let me call her. My goodness. Well, I guess we can get back to what you were talking about. You were talking about the importance of having a. Wow, I've lost everybody.
I'm still here.
Oh, okay. It said you
You want
had.
me to go on? I'll just continue, and then whenever Cathy is able to get on, then we'll just because I can see here whether she's trying to get on or not.
Okay.
Anyway, so the point of learning. There's a chapter on how to deal with the police, and it's aimed at avoiding a lot of the unnecessary police shootings that we see these videos of. For example, you're being pulled over in the car, and the police officer is nervous. Remember, from their point of view, most of the shootings occur when they walk up beside some guy in a car, and that guy pulls a gun and shoots him. So they're always the most nervous, even more scared than you are, when they're walking up behind you. So rather than make those police officers more nervous, if you can, again, what we talked about earlier with the, reducing the aggression and dissipating or reducing the tension. Well, same thing with the police. What you want to do with the police is reduce their fear so that they don't feel the need to pull out a gun and shoot you. And whether it's right or wrong doesn't matter because, this is a life and death situation now. So in the book, I recommend that if you're pulled over, turn on your dome light so that they can see who's in the car. They're always, they can't necessarily see from the back if there's a bunch of people in there, and so they don't know what they're walking up on. If you turn on the dome light, they're better able to look inside the car and see who's there. And again, that reduces the police officer's fear. And that's what we want to do. Remember, they have guns. You don't want to make them up nervous and twitchy. The second thing you do is you keep your hands on the steering wheel and you don't get out of the car. Now, this is opposite the kind of information I was given when I was young. In those days, they told you always, well, if you're pulled over, get out of the car, walk up to the police officer. That way he can see you. And also you equalize the power ratio between you and the cop. He's not looking down on you in your seat. You're now eye to eye with him. But it turns out this information was wrong. And so the correct thing to do is stay in your car, because when they see you get out of the car right away, they think you're coming to attack them. So again, we want to just, calm them down. Mm-hmm. So you stay in the car. You keep your hands on the steering wheel so they can see your hands. You don't reach into the glove compartment. You don't reach under the seat. You don't reach into the side compartment because they think you're going for a gun and then they will shoot you. So it's basic information, basic advice, and it's meant to keep everybody happy and safe, And this, it doesn't matter if you're a criminal or you're not a criminal. They can't tell when they pull you over. So, and the same as you can't tell when, what kind of a cop is going to come up to you. So the more you can do to dissuade the situation. I mean, there's a part of me, I don't want to be pulled over. I don't want to have to answer for something I didn't do. I don't want to be interrogated. I don't want to feel threatened by the authority of the law. But there's no alternative. You can't, run. You can't fight them. So best thing to do, calm the situation down. So that's on police stops. And also on the chapter on police also deals with secret police. By secret police, I mean all of the alphabet agencies that don't go around with a badge on the outside of their uniform. Mm-hmm. And in that chapter, I give the example. For example, let's say you're a group of naturalists and you want to protest, the cutting of some trees in a local park. So you would think, there's nothing harmful about people like that. Often they're made up of middle-aged housewives, and so why would you have to be concerned about keeping operational security within your group? But it turned out there are cases where undercover police officers have actually infiltrated such an organization to spy on them, because they posed a threat to a big corporation that wanted to appropriate that land for some, exploitation for their natural minerals. So even if you think you're an above board, unsuspicious, outstanding, honest, law-abiding citizen, does not mean you won't be targeted by secret police. So
exactly. Well, we see evidence of that every day here in the States.
Yeah. For example, I saw that video there where they did the raid on the Whole Foods where they were giving unpasteurized milk. And here they come in like it's a SWAT team. They're raiding, a mom and pop farm that sells unpasteurized milk, and these guys are swinging in off of helicopters and running around with their guns raised as if they're going to be attacked by terrorist forces. I mean, it was just ridiculous, the overreaction to it. But that's the way things are now. Cathy mentioned about since the Patriot Act, has anything changed? Well, no, even more reason to be careful around police forces. Look, most of them are okay, and we hope they're on the side of good. But the way things have been hyped up with, this phony war on drugs and a phony war on terrorism, they've got everybody nervous and twitchy, and then you've got the police forces nervous and twitchy, where, even to arrest somebody for, jaywalking, they send in a SWAT team with the guns raised. So, look, you got to know how to deal now with that situation and diffuse it and do everything you can to make sure nobody has a reason to pull triggers. And that's part of the book as well.
Kind of like in the Old West, no sudden moves.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Again, like I say, it's like dealing with a wild bear that you run across in the woods. No sudden movements, no, back off, be quiet. Talk reassuringly. Good bear, good bear, good bear, and because accidents happen, and again, the book is just meant to provide the kind of basic information to keep people alive in those kind of situations that can occur in an urban environment. And yeah, police stops, pulls overs. If they're knocking on a door, they're banging into your door, they're breaking down the door to do a police raid. Maybe they got the wrong address. They think you're, Colombian cocaine dealers or something like that. How many times has that happened?
Oh my gosh, uncountable.
And, you're sitting on the couch and you go for the remote control or something to turn down the sound on TV set, and they think you're going for a gun, and boom. I mean, these are real incidences that really happen, and people were killed because of things like that. So that's why it's good to know how to handle all these different situations.
Well, going back to the body language, now, if you are confronted with someone, is it better to maintain an eye contact or not?
No, eye contact is a universal sign of aggression. For example, you don't stare at a bear in the eye either, because they will assume that that's an act of aggression. Same thing with people. They don't like direct eye contact. Now, that doesn't mean you should avoid their eyes. You need to make some contact with their eyes, but don't stare. So you kind of glance at their eyes. And what I recommend is that you look at the tip of their nose. So this way you're not really looking into their eyes, but from their perspective you are, but it's not quite as menacing. And then, again, don't stare, but don't keep your eyes averted the whole time either, because now it looks like you're hiding something. So you have to kind of balance it. You look in their eyes a little bit, and then you look off to the side. That way you establish an equality. I am looking you in the eye. I recognize you as a person. For example, if you're dealing with some of those crazy schizophrenic people that are homeless and that you're walking down the street and they all love me. They see me a mile away. As soon as I start walking down the street, they're ready to talk to me, So if you were to avoid their gaze entirely, you're not recognizing their existence, and now they're suddenly even more agitated. So what I would do is I would look at them and I would speak with them, but again, don't stare, and then I would move on. And it's the same thing, with aggressive people in a bar or dealing with the police. You don't want to not acknowledge their existence by not looking at them at all, and yet you don't want to signal that you're being aggressive by staring at them. So happy medium between the two would be the best way to go.
So you just kind of have to use your own judgment. And
Yeah.
because I've been in a few situations where maintaining the eye contact helped me avoid a fight.
Yeah, yeah. And again, it's an act of aggression. Now, most conflicts, interspecies conflicts, is resolved through what's called threat display behavior. So, for example, two roosters meet each other. The first thing they do is they hackle up, their feathers hackle up, and the wings come out and they start posturing. And a lot of the time, it won't come to actual blows. It's rather whoever appears more threatening tends to intimidate the other one into backing down. And the same thing happens with people. And it's hard to, provide a general rule for how to react in every situation, but definitely in some situations, you need to have a counter threat display, because if you appear too much like a victim, then you're encouraging more abuse or more aggression to be directed towards you. So you have to use a counter threat. And that counter threat could be a firm glance in their eyes and telling them, and with the expression on your face and the mental attitude that, okay, I've been about as nice as I can be with you, and you're just about to step over the line, and then I'm going to have to deal with you. And if you give them that look, and you know the kind of look I mean, right?
I know exactly the kind of look you mean. Apparently, I'm pretty good at it.
That's a great talent to have. You give them that look, and they'll back down. And so again, you got to balance these things. You have to take into account a lot of factors. Are they armed? Are they mentally unstable? Are they on drugs? Because a lot of these things won't work if they're, on meth or they're on crank or something like that.
Very true.
Right? So, a tactic that would work well with a sane person who's just having a bad day won't work with somebody who's just, strung out on drugs. And now you're giving them that look, and that's a challenge to them. And now they have to answer that challenge by beating your head in with a pipe.
So that would be when you would walk softly and be very pleasant and just try to sidestep and evade them, correct?
Yeah, and it's all part of reading them. And I'm hoping that, when you read that whole first section of the book, all about the psychopaths and the body language and what anger and aggression is and territoriality and people's personal space and comfort zones and reading them and the street smarts and, dealing with crazy people, you need to develop a sense of things. And to be honest with you, you can't really read it and learn it from a book. Now, the book will give you the background information, but you then have to combine it with your own life experience and make it a part of you. And then once it's a part of you, you don't need to remember what the advice of the book is, because you'll be going on instinct. So you'll be able to tell the situation, and you'll be able to deal with it and handle it. And that's what I'm hoping, and that's why I wrote the book, is to give people, a bigger picture of what, the dynamics of a threatening or dangerous situation are. Not just, here's a tool and use it. So somebody does this, right away punch them in the face, or, there's a tsunami coming, right away get in the car and run away. It doesn't always work that way, but instead, it has to be internalized, and you have to develop your own sense of street smarts and then a touch of instinct and intuition, and you're good to go. Mm-hmm.
Well, now, I have always believed that it's very important not to look like a victim. If you're walking, you should have erect posture, continuously scanning your surroundings, and, look like you're not an easy victim.
Absolutely. They did studies of criminals, and they had them, fill out questionnaires. They went to the prisons and asked them to describe the kind of people that they would attack and what they were looking for in potential victims. And what they're looking for is people that are distracted and not paying attention, and that project a body language that suggests that they would not fight back. Again, like I said earlier, I can tell a lot by a person by the way they walk, and so can criminals. And they did a study for women that had taken a self-defense course. And what they found was that women, once they had taken a self-defense course, were far less likely to be attacked. And the reason they figured it out was that why that would be was because once you had some training, you had a little bit more confidence in yourself. And that confidence manifested itself in your body language. Again, your mental attitude is directly linked to your physical body as well. If you're nervous and anxious all the time, you're going to get sick. You'll come down with more colds and flus. If you're worried and panic, you're more susceptible to things like diabetes and cancer. And so if you feel confidence in yourself that if something happened, you have some strategies, you have, a plan of what to do, that also manifests itself in your body language. And so what these studies showed was, or what they deduced from these studies, is that the women that did take a self-defense course simply walked better, and so they had more of a swagger to them. They're exactly like you said. You keep your head up. You scan your environment. I do that all the time. I scan it.
I do too. I always have.
I always
tried
have
to instill that in my girls' heads.
Oh yeah.
Don't be
yeah.
on the cell phone texting. Know where you
Thank
are.
you.
Know who's around you. If you know if there's a safe spot close by in case you have to make a run for it. Know where you can go.
Yep, exactly. I'm glad you're teaching that to the girls because that is your premier self-defense technique. Because what you want to do is, what they found was that, potential predators will size a person up like that. Are they scanning their environment? Because the element of surprise is a huge strategic advantage. So for a criminal, they want to catch somebody by surprise because now the advantage is on their side, And if it looks like they can't catch you by surprise, they would tend to ignore that person and wait for somebody else to come by that does have their nose in the goddamn iPhones. I hate those things. I think they suck the life out of people. By all means, do not drive and use those things or walk down the street with your head stuck in one and not see what's going on because you're just inviting an attack that way. I mean, they're completely oblivious as to what's going around them, and that's what criminals look for.
I'm going to send Cathy a message and see if she's trying to call. But, I think what you're saying, a lot of it is common sense, but so many people anymore don't seem to have any common sense.
Yeah, we always say it's common sense, but it's actually not common at all. That
Not anymore.
Not anymore. No, I see that around me all the time. I mean, I can tell, they are so, it's a good thing I'm not a criminal because it would have been so easy to, you could probably just walk up and take their purse. They wouldn't even notice. Or slip the wallet. Just keep walking.
I know. That's something that I always do too, is I always have a good hand on my purse. Or if I have it on a shopping cart, I have my arm looped through the strap so nobody can just grab it and run.
Yeah.
And it's little things like that can be extremely helpful to you in the long run. Cathy just left a message that said a bad rainstorm right now. That could be what's been affecting her Skype. So I hope you don't mind finishing the show with me.
No problem. Doing a good job.
Do you have a website?
Yeah, I have a website. It's www. Of course, everything is chinastrategies.com. It's a weird name. I got the website back in 1998 when my first book came out. And, everybody said, oh, get a website for your book. I said, okay, China Strategies is my first book. So, but I just kept adding everything to that original website because I didn't want to maintain dozens of different websites, one for every book.
Exactly. And where are your books available? Can you get them on Amazon?
Yeah, they're on Amazon, they're on Kindle, they're on Smashwords, and a couple of them are even audiobooks. 36 Strategies is an audiobook, and Blind Zen, if you have anyone with a vision impairment, it's a great book for them because it teaches blind people how to use self-defense, but also how to improve the other senses, sense of touch, sense of smell, sense of direction, using a bunch of Zen meditation techniques and exercises. Yeah.
One of my grandmothers was blind, and it was amazing. She cooked. She could drop something on the floor and could reach right down and pick it up.
Yeah.
Just amazing.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, and since I wrote that book, I've been in touch with blind martial artists from all over the world, and it's amazing what they can still do, And I'm thinking also of the veterans that may have lost their sight during combat, and they're still young men, and they feel that their manhood is gone with their sight, but there is a lot of hope that they can still be a strong, forceful and powerful person in this world,
Exactly. I also had another blind relative, and he knew people by their hands. And it didn't matter how many years it had been since he'd seen you. He could take your hand, and he knew exactly who you were.
Yeah. My favorite, one of my favorite people is Helen Keller. And she was just, what a remarkable individual. And my favorite quote from her is, there is no certainty in life. Any sense of security is an illusion. Life is either a daring adventure or nothing at all. And, she's right.
She is a very good person as a role model, because not only was she blind, she was also deaf and couldn't speak. Look what she made of herself. Unbelievable.
What an inspiration. Interesting, she wrote about her sense of smell became very highly attuned, and she could smell people's personalities. And I researched this as well, and a great source of information came from Oliver Sacks. I don't know if you've heard of him. He was a neurologist, and he's famous for his book, The Awakenings. They made a movie out of it with that.
I did see the movie, but I wasn't familiar with the doctor's name.
Yeah, Dr. Oliver Sacks, and he wrote a book called The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. And
now, I did read that book.
Yeah, isn't that a great book?
The title was so eye-catching. I'm like, I have to read this book.
Yeah. And so you remember the story about the guy who had the tumor on his olfactory nerve, and he was suddenly able to smell everything? The man who could smell like a dog. Remember that chapter?
No, I mean, it's been probably 20 years since I read that book.
Yeah, it's been 20 years. Yeah. The reason I came back to it was when I was writing my book on Blind Zen and trying to understand how to develop those senses so that they can, compensate somewhat for the loss of vision. And in the chapter, the man who could smell like a dog, this guy woke up one day. He had a dream that he was a dog. And the next morning he woke up and he could smell everything. He could smell what a playing card was, the suit and number of a playing card by the amount of red and black ink on the playing card.
Wow.
He could smell when somebody was about to ask him a question. He could smell, a person's personality, whether they were nervous or happy or sad. He could smell what they've eaten and where they've been. And Eventually, he lost that sense of smell. The tumor grew bigger, and and his smell went away completely. But for that 2 years or so, I think that he had it. He said his world revolved around this sense of smell. And so Helen Keller says the same thing. She tells of being able to go into a house and smelling the layers of smells of all the people that lived in that house before, over the preceding 50 to 100 years, and the personalities of all the people that had lived there. And when she wrote about that, it was sort of like a really outrageous claim. How could you smell the personalities of people that had lived in a house 20 years ago? But then you read Oliver Sacks and those cases where through some neurological dysfunction, they became, the term is hypermosia, which means increased sense of smell or decreased ability to detect smell. And when these people described exactly the same thing that Helen Keller was describing, it really vindicated what she was writing about. And so it just goes to show you the power of our senses. This is just the sense of smell. And with your friend being able to recognize people by touching their hand, absolutely, it's a sense of touch. So in the book Blind Sin, I go into how to develop smell and sense of touch, sense of direction, sense of hearing, all of which to get a better idea of what's going on in the world around you. For example, you're walking down the street and you can hear footsteps behind you, but can you tell if it's a big guy or a woman, if it's two people, if it's children? Actually, you can. It's really simple. All you have to do is turn around and look and remember what the sounds are made by those types of people. And you do that over a period of a few months. You listen for the sound, you look and you check out the source of the sound, and you recognize what kind of people made the sound. After a couple of months, you can walk down the street, and when you hear footsteps behind you, you can tell. Remember what you were saying before, that you're scanning and you're looking around, you got your head up. Mm-hmm. Well, now you got your ears working for you too. So now it's almost like, superhuman powers. You hear somebody behind you, you can tell if it's a 200-pound guy or if it's a 135-pound girl in running shoes. You'll be able to tell the difference. It's not, psychic powers or anything. It's simply becoming aware of sensory information and categorizing it and learning to recognize that type of information. But, we never do that. We hear a set of footsteps, we keep walking, we don't to check it out, we don't, try to listen for the sound of it, the patter. Or
I usually glance back.
Yeah, I usually do too. And then you start to recognize the sounds, right?
Yeah. Well, it's funny, the sense of smell. My husband says every person smells different, and he associates, the people with the smells. Like he said, I smell like caramel.
Oh, that's good. Nice. I like that smell of caramel.
Yeah, I said, well, that's pretty good. If you just said, rotten eggs or something, that wouldn't have been so nice. But I can live with caramel. And he said his mom smells like apples.
Well, there's another thing that I came across. And again, all this actually goes back to self-defense training and martial arts, is being able to, be aware of things that other people aren't aware of. But there's a sense called synesthesia, and some people have it, and it's really bizarre. What happens is that something is not filtered properly. Like our brains filter most of the information out, or otherwise, we would be overwhelmed with everything that goes on around us. So our brains are basically filtering things out. And in some people, the filters don't work too well. And what happens is sensory information crosses over. So somebody who is what they call a synesthetic, they will hear, for example, say some music, but that music will also have a texture for them. They will feel a texture. Or somebody can smell something, and that smell will be a color to them.
Yes. I've watched some documentaries about that kind of thing.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about that for me is that, oh my God, the amount of information you can actually get through your senses. Music has a color, music has a texture, music has a smell. Smell has a color, smell has a texture.
do
You know,
you do you think it's possible that maybe some of their junk DNA, as it's called, is activated?
it could be. I'm a firm believer in epigenetic influences. That your environment will trigger certain genetic traits to come forward, and I think that's a really provides a lot of hope for people because
Would you mind going into a little more explanation of that, please?
epigenetics.
Yes.
Well, we have the theory of genetics, and that is, your tastes, your abilities, and everything is inherited directly from your parents through the genes.
Uh-huh.
Now, epigenetics may have to do with the junk DNA that's in there, and it is triggered now, they find, by environmental factors. I'm trying to remember for example, let's say you inherit a gene that doesn't allow you to gain a lot of weight. So those types.
That
They
would
can
be
eat
nice. That would be a nice gene to have. Yes.
wouldn't that be nice? I got a buddy like that. He's always been skinny his whole life. He still is skinny. He can eat whatever, and his problem was always trying to gain weight. So he might have inherited that gene, but in another situation, in times of famine, it might trigger another gene that would pack on the weight, which is a survival mechanism, which is why, a lot of First Nations people tend to be kind of heavy because they've had so many droughts and famines in their history that the gene for putting on weight was a survival mechanism. And then when you find yourself in a calorie-rich environment, you tend to gain more weight. And so now you're chubby, but you're the one that would survive a famine,
Uh-huh.
So this is where the environmental conditions will trigger a gene to come into play, and that gene will now modify your behavior, and it can even modify your body. So this is really kind of interesting because it opens up a world of possibilities of enhancing one's ability to detect things. And also going back to the smell, a lot of times we have kind of a hunch about feelings, or we get a bad feeling about somebody. Now, it may be that bad feeling, or even a good feeling, it doesn't matter. Like you get an instinct about somebody. He's a good person. He's somebody not to be trusted, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe what you're doing is you're smelling that person's personality. But because our brains tend to repress most of the sensory information, that smell of a bad personality doesn't really reach your consciousness, your forebrain, but instead kind of resonates with this kind of feeling that you have. So what if we can, develop our brains and develop our minds to perceive more things around us? Then you meet somebody and you go, something smells fishy. Where do you think that came from, right? Right?
I like that. I like that.
Of course it smells fishy because that's probably what's really happening. You're kind of in a subconscious level, or below consciousness. Your body is picking up information that tells you this person is not to be trusted. Problem is, we've been taught and educated and socialized and to ignore that type of information from an early age. And so it never reaches our ability to recognize it for what it is. And instead we have a hunch, we have a feeling, we have the sixth sense, So there's a lot of things like that. A lot of that I deal with in the book Blind Sen. It's not just for blind people. If you're interested in sensory enhancement and learning how to fight with a blindfold on, that book's for you. But more, and I'm going to deal with this in an upcoming book too, called The Fourth Way of the Warrior, where I go into all the kind of sensory enhancement techniques. It's almost, I'm a very skeptical person. I've always looked for a scientific explanation for, psychic powers and things like that. But it's true. If you train long enough the way of Zen and the way of the warrior, you do get kind of psychic powers, and I attribute it to the increased in sensitivity and ability to perceive things. But for most people, it looks almost like a sixth sense. You can almost read minds,
The sense of smell, would that also explain the indefinable charisma that some people have?
That could be it too,
They just
because
give out a smell that attracts you to them, but subconsciously.
well, Helen Keller mentioned that absolutely. She said she could smell personalities, and she said that interesting people had a very strong and interesting smell, and that people that were really dull and really, weren't much to speak of had very little smell. So when your husband was saying that, he senses all these smells coming from you, that might be an indication that you have a very good personality because you're giving off a distinct smell that your husband likes. And that might be,
Well, I guess that's a good thing. Now, since you have followed this and done the martial arts, do you feel like you almost have a sixth sense?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I don't want to talk about it because it sounds like, oh, you're bragging. And again, I don't believe in psychic powers per se.
So
And
you're
I don't.
basically picking up on clues that people are giving you that you are in tune with that say, I wouldn't even perceive, but you would be able to read that person just by their
Yeah,
what
yeah,
they're
and it
putting
and it
on.
comes from years of studying it. Yeah, yeah, all those things that they're giving up, the way they walk, the tone of their voice, their body language, the way they dress, the words they use. It all adds up to a big picture, and it's almost, yeah, I don't know how to say it. There's something there. Um, And I can't define what it is, and I don't want to make any kind of claims for myself as being, more superior or something like that. It's really got nothing to do with that. I think it's a skill that people can learn, but you got to be, yeah, it's a skill some people can learn.
Exactly. I've always said that the better psychics are extremely good people readers.
Yeah, yeah, it's there's people that they're just a dim light bulb and they will never learn anything. They will never understand this. And so from their perspective, yeah, then it's psychic powers because like they're so unaware of things. Then even a little bit of perception seems like magical powers from their perspective. I imagine. I don't know because they're usually so dull you can't even get them to understand their own situation. But for people that are a little bit more aware and have a conscience and have a desire for knowledge and want to know things, see, people ask me, well, how come you can do all this stuff and it takes so much discipline? Well, no, it's not discipline. I want to know. I enjoy learning it. And I enjoy finding things out. So it's not like I force myself to learn things. Oh, geez, I'm going to sit down and crack this book and learn this stuff. I devour information. I love it, So there is no need for discipline. It's what I do naturally. And if you have that lust for knowledge and that desire for wisdom, you just absorb this stuff. And when you absorb enough of it, you start to function at a higher level. I don't know how else to describe it. It's just you're more sensitive, more aware, and you'll be able to perceive things that may seem miraculous, may seem extraordinary.
Would any of this be based on like an IQ level? Like if somebody has a low IQ, it would be really difficult for them to absorb a lot of this knowledge, correct?
Well, yeah, I recognize three types of IQ. The IQ, the intelligence quota, which is based mostly on information and knowledge. And yeah, you can't be an idiot, but you don't need to be a genius either because There is a kinesiatic intelligence,
So
which
someone
is,
like me who's kind of like middle of the road, I'm smart enough to know that I'm not that smart. I could absorb some of this if I really sat down and focused on it.
well, absolutely, because it's not just the intelligence. It's the body. The kinesiatic intelligence is even smarter than the brain intelligence on many different levels. And so, if you're uh, there's people that might not be great at cracking a book and regurgitating all the information in that book,
Hmm.
but they're brilliant dancer or they're a great ice skater or they're good at downhill skiing or they can ride a horse or you know these are things that require a body intelligence, and a body intelligence is really important to it. It's to me, it's as important as the intellectual intelligence. And then there's a third type of intelligence called the EQ, or the emotional quotient, and that is um, sort of the feeling part of a person.
Uh-huh.
How much heart you have, how much empathy, how much compassion, and when you have empathy, you feel what other people feel. So it's like reading their minds. Now it's not intellectual. You're not, hearing their thoughts in their head,
No.
but you are feeling what they are feeling, which is what's more important, what they're thinking or what they're feeling, right? So an EQ is just as important. To me, all three of those intelligent quotas are equal. They all have advantages and disadvantages. IQ is good, but IQ is slow and stupid. Um, if you're in an emergency situation and you have to move fast, thinking your way through it is too slow. You have to react from instinct, and that's your body intelligence. Your body will know how to move and how to get out of it and where the obstacles are. Your body figures that out. It's not your brain. And when dealing with people, like, for example, what we were talking about with anger and aggression, well, your emotional intelligence is way more important in that situation because you'll be able to feel what they're feeling and you'll be able to feel whether or not they're ready to go to violence or whether they can be appeased or the situation can be dissipated. Your intelligence is too slow for that. It works on a slow level. So they all have advantages, but I think IQ is overrated a lot. Certainly in any kind of a survival situation, yeah, it's good to have some knowledge, but if you can't actualize that knowledge through feeling and movement, which is your emotional and your body equivalent, body intelligence, then just knowledge by itself isn't enough. You know?
I tend to react really well in crisis situations. I stay calm and do what has to be done. It's little things like losing my keys that throw me into an absolute and complete panic.
Hmm.
So
Well,
I don't know what that would be, but I've
yeah, well,
always
that would be your
tended to handle the huge crises in my life extremely well.
that would be your body intelligence, because that's your instinct taking over, and it's very it's typical in that kind of a situation. For example, if you were just IQ centered, focused only on your brain, then during a pressure situation, you'll tend to break down. I think, judging from what you've told me, that you're probably more centered in the kinesiatic intelligence, which means that things that shouldn't bother you tend to bother you because now you're working on an emotional and intellectual level. But when a crisis happens, boom, you switch over into instinct, and it's that instinct that keeps you calm and allows you to react and do the right thing for that situation. But that instinct doesn't kick in unless it's really a dangerous situation. So or you're under pressure, right? Uh,
Exactly.
so that would like yeah. So that's a good thing to have. I'm the same way too. I've had situations where, oh my God, I'm in danger, and boom, I kick into this instinct, and I'm calm, and I managed to do the right thing and say the right thing, and I could never plan that in a million years. If somebody said, "Well, here's the situation, and you've got 3 days to think about what you would do," I couldn't do it. I couldn't plan it all
I
out.
would be totally at sea and have 900 pieces of paper with scribblings surrounding me trying to figure out point A to point B.
Yeah, but we talk about this with my police officer friend because he's very into the Zen too, and this man has gone through combat and when he was teaching hand-to-hand combat at the police academy, they'd always give him that question, and as a martial arts instructor, I always get the same question too. Well, if a guy came up to you and he's got a knife and he does this, what would you do? Well, both his and my answer have always been the same. I don't know. I'll know when it happens, because I can't tell you what I'm going to do, right? But I do know that if somebody is running at me with a knife or a baseball bat or something like that, what I will do is the right thing that is needed to be done in that situation, depending on all the variables that are going to occur within a moment's notice. And this is not something you can plan out intellectually because every situation is dynamic. Maybe it's a big knife, maybe it's a small knife, maybe he's got a buddy with him. There are all kinds of things that factor into the situation that you can't pre-plan using your intellect, and you have to have trained your instinct, and then your instinct takes over and deals with the situation. And I think that's what you're talking about when you're under pressure, that, if there's a crisis.
I do not like confrontation, and I will avoid confrontation at almost any cost, but don't ever put me in a corner because only one of us is coming out, and it's not going to be you.
Yeah.
It's going to be me.
Yeah.
But, yeah, confrontation makes me extremely nervous and agitated. And I will go to great lengths to avoid it.
Sure.
But when it comes to your back against the wall, then, yeah, I will confront you in a very bad way.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would hazard to guess that is your moving center, your kinesiatic intelligence, or your instinct kicking in, and it's a good skill to have, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's got me through to this, and like I said, I've tried to instill this in my girls: never be a victim, always be aware, always have a backup plan, know what you're going to do if somebody confronts you. Scream. Don't ever be a victim. If somebody tells you to be quiet, do not be quiet.
Yeah, yeah. The same studies that they did found that people that do fight back tend to survive. Make it as much trouble for them as possible, because going along with them is more likely to result in trouble, and certainly never allow yourself to be taken to a secondary crime scene, is what they call it. They'll see you on the street, and then they'll say, okay, get in the car, or I'll shoot you. No, it's better you make the run now, because once you're in the car, now your chances of escape. Remember, every time they try to move you to another location, it's always in the advantage of the predator. And even if they're holding a gun at you, if you're walking down the street and somebody pulls a gun and says, get in the car, you're better off running at that point than getting in the car for a number of reasons. One, that person might be more hesitant to use the gun while standing on a public street with a bunch of people around that could possibly hear, or there might be police cars nearby, and draw a lot of attention to himself by firing off a handgun. Then after he's gotten you in the car and driven you out to the woods, then he's perfectly free to use the handgun and nobody's going to come. Second, even if he does shoot, people are, especially criminals, notoriously bad shots. They did a study about where they analyzed all the gun battles that police engaged in, and they found out that most gun battles occur within 20 feet. So that's a small bedroom, right?
And run in a zigzag pattern, right?
And run in a zigzag pattern, and then with the number of shots fired by criminals within a 20-foot range, 90% of the time they miss. So even if that person is, aiming a gun at you, try to distract them. I always recommend some kind of a distraction, throw some keys or something at them, or point over his shoulder and say, please arrest this man or something, get him distracted and then run like hell, because in about 2 seconds you can get 20 feet on him. And after that, he's only got a 10% chance of hitting you if he shoots. And even if he does shoot and hit you, there's only, again, a 10% chance that wound would be fatal. And so you're better off being wounded in the street where there might be, people that can come and help you and rush you to a hospital, than to be taken away in a car and shot and left for dead in the woods where nobody's going to find you and take you to a hospital.
Exactly. Well, Stefan, we got about 2 minutes left. Thank you for staying on with me this hour.
No, you're welcome.
I have enjoyed it tremendously, and you have given a lot of practical, fantastic advice. And if you want to give out your website again and your books, feel free.
Sure. The name of the book is The Art of Urban Survival, Family Safety and Self-Defense Manual, because it's meant for the family. There's chapters in there on how to keep your kids safe, and there's nothing in there that's, going to scare anyone. It's very practical advice and very sane. And the website is chinastrategies.com.
Okay. Well, I hope that you will be able to come on again, and that Cathy's issue won't have the issues that she's had tonight.
Yeah, I'd be happy to come back on. And Cathy, if you're listening, I'm sorry we missed we missed you the last hour.
I know. But like I said, thank you for staying on with me, and it's been great. I have learned so much. And folks, pay attention to your dog. If they don't like a person, there's probably a good reason for that. So pay attention to your dogs.
I do, yeah.
I do too. If my dog doesn't like somebody, I'm not going to like them either.
Yeah, and conversely, dogs love me. People walk by with their dogs, and the dogs see me, and they go, whoop, they come running, and, so that's a good sign.
I'm a cat whisperer. Cats seem to like me.
Oh, I have 3 in the house here.
I'm not even going to tell you how many we have because it's totally embarrassing.
Yeah, I'm the crazy cat man.
Oh, okay, folks. I hope you enjoyed the show. And Stefan, please, I'm sure Cathy will have you back again. Very enjoyable. People, look for his books. There's a lot of good smarts in there. You can learn all kinds of things. Yes. My name is Liz, by the way. I'm not just Studio B switchboard.
Okay.
And I will look for your books. That what was it, Blind Zen?
Yeah, that's for blind people or vision impaired, and
that's it. You have a great night,
okay.
Stefan, and thank you again. Good night.
Bye-bye. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you.